Hey everyone, welcome back. Welcome to another weekly chat between myself, Dan, and David Persin. So, this week is a little bit different to our previous chats because, as I said at the end of the last episode, we're recording this a lot earlier than we normally would because we have plans Memorial Day weekend. I'm out of town, so I can't do recording. So, what we're going to do is we're going to do a special episode in which we are just going to talk about David and his history with collecting. It's something that a lot of people have been requesting. So that's what we're going to do today. So no comments to read out today because, the video's only been up for a day or two when we're recording. So all the comments from that one and from this one will be gone through at the start of the next episode. So if you're looking for your comment, tune in next week as well to make sure that you hear that.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, David.
So, Dan, what I'm doing is I found out there's a little camera button at the bottom of my computer now. I'm actually looking at it. I had no idea it was there. Usually I think it's up here somewhere, Dan. But now I think I'm not looking at anything that's relevant to the broadcast. So I'm going to be looking down here at this little dot that I see. And that's a good discovery. After 6 episodes, this is number 7 of Coffee Talk.
Yeah.
Let me say a couple things. Okay, number 1, it looks like you did a nice shaving job. Did you do that this morning, Dan? I'm used to seeing a little more fuzzle there, some fizzle.
I did. I shaved this morning because we're going to a wedding this weekend.
Sure. So, Dan, here's the deal. You're going to a wedding and you can shave for that, but the broadcasts of Coffee Talk with Dave, Uncle Dave, whoever, not even important, huh? Like, had there never been a wedding, you'd just be growing that thing out to like Santa Claus beard length. Am I correct?
I'd get annoyed with it eventually and just take it off.
All right.
I never shaved regularly. Just once I got annoyed with it, it came off, and then I'd grow it till I got annoyed again.
I like that. Now, does Laura have any input to your facial hair? Does she get a request or a it's too long, Dan, kind of thing?
She doesn't mind it either way, really. She's okay.
Well, that's a good wife. Hang on.
Yeah.
Dan, you said you were going away for Memorial Day weekend and you couldn't film. I think that's ridiculous. We all know that you could have found a way back home, flown in, done something, but you're just taking the easy way out. Am I correct?
Sure. Let's go with that.
Okay. Dan, this is.
I am not the one who is really limited to basically 1 day a week under normal circumstances.
Okay, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. So
the wedding is on the Saturday, so we have to drive back on the Sunday, and the wedding itself is on a farm in the middle of nowhere, so there is no way we could record at the farm because there is basically no internet connection.
Dan, tell people how your Friday is going to look before the wedding tomorrow.
My Friday. What I'm going to do is I am going to sleep because, as it turns out, this weekend, not only being Memorial Day and this wedding we're going to, is also Pokemon pre-release weekend for Paldea Evolved. So, Laura also planned to run a lot of other tournaments during that weekend until we realized it was the same weekend as the wedding. But we're still hosting the midnight pre-release at our local store. Because as people know, you can start running pre-releases from the Saturday of the first weekend. And it doesn't have to be normal times. You can run that at 12:01 a.m. on the Saturday. So for a few sets now, we started before the pandemic, we've been running a midnight pre-release. So it's the earliest possible time in our time zone that you can get these cards. So I'm sleeping all day Friday. We're going to go and run the midnight pre-release. I am then going to film the opening of Laura's Judge Packs, which by the time you see this podcast, you'll already have seen that video. And then I'm going to edit the video. And then I'm going to go and pick Laura up from when she's finishing running the midnight pre-release. And then we're going to drive to Virginia. And on the way to Virginia, I'm going to stop off at a Starbucks and publish the video that you will hopefully have seen on Saturday morning. That is the plan. If you saw the video, it all went well. If you didn't, something happened. One last thing to say before we get into it. If you can hear background noise, I'm sorry, but neighbors are cutting trees down. If you're hearing this, it means that during the edit, I heard the background noise. So sorry for that.
Dan, don't worry about it. Yeah, no, people can't get past your noise, Dan, so it's all good. And that was a really good description of a really busy weekend, and how no matter what it is, you're always playing by the rules, and yet giving your league people and all those folks nice opportunities to enjoy the new release as well. So congratulations.
Yeah. Well, we used to do it for Magic the Gathering a lot. A lot of places would do midnight release for the new Magic the Gathering set whenever that came out. And then one time we just said, should we do it for Pokemon? And then we got quite a nice turnout. So the store owner was like, yeah, we can just keep doing it.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about, this whole mental illness epidemic, and a lot of people just can't sleep anymore, Dan. So it's better to just go do something. They say when you toss and turn enough, just get out of bed and go do something. So apparently they're all headed to Laura and the pre-release. So
Yep.
that's good. That's good. Should I jump in, Dan?
Yes, jump in. Uh, why don't you start from the beginning? Start with what was the first thing you ever collected? What got you interested in collecting it all? And then we'll go from there.
Dan, a really good suggestion. I was going to start from the ending, but now that you said start from the beginning, I love it. I think we should just
Yeah,
start right
it's
there.
great. Well, we're not going to memento this. I'm not editing that. I haven't got time.
Okay, nice.
You're
Yeah.
looking at me confused. Have you seen Memento?
No, I'm not even looking at you. I want you to understand.
All
I'm
right.
looking straight at the camera. I'm not going to look at you
Okay.
this whole video just to see what it's like when I continue to stare right at this little white dot.
All
Okay.
right. Okay.
So hopefully it looks like I'm looking at you, but I haven't even glanced at you once.
All right. Well, it does look
All
like
right.
you're
So,
looking at me. Yes.
okay, good. Well, I'm going to put Memento on my must-watch list for whatever
Yeah.
that's worth. And then
Okay.
I'm going to apologize in advance to everyone because who wants to hear me just talk about myself? I don't even want to listen. So hopefully I can, eliminate my own audio track when I'm done. But that being said, sure, let's go through a brief history of my entire life and how I got into collecting and stuff in Pokemon. And here
It
we go.
almost feels like you should be lying down on a couch for this.
You know what? I will revisit this with my therapist on next Wednesday.
Yeah.
So,
If
I
you give me your
appreciate it.
therapist's email address, we can just send the file straight over to your therapist and they can figure it out.
Yeah, it's telehealth.doc. So
There
I
we
can
go.
get you the specific
All
email
right.
address. So all right. So in no particular order except from beginning to end, I actually started collecting or having an interest in collecting something when I was just a young child. And that probably was about 8 or 9 years old. And I would send away every single year to a place called Renata Galasso Inc. in New York. And it was baseball cards. And so if you can think about that, that was about 1970 or so. And I was a completionist back then. I would get every new set that came out, and I would also get, all of the addendum sets, and there was lots of different sets. There could have been like Topps and Fleer and Donruss or whatever was out at the time.
Okay.
I would always buy them in full, so I thought they would be good investment if I kept them, unopened, or I put them in sheets, and that's what I did. So even as a young child, I did that, and nobody was helping me. My dad, my mom, no one was really involved. It was just me being interested in doing that. And I think that speaks to a bit of my personality, which is continuing, to look at myself as very introverted. A lot of people see me kind
Yeah.
of humorous and stuff on this stuff. More intimate environments, I can be a little bit more social, but I tend to be very much introverted, and I really enjoyed when I wasn't, I'm not going to be out spending time with friends. I wasn't a friendship person anyway, all the way through teenagers. I was just kind of with myself doing my cards, enjoying putting the stuff together and building a collection. And what's different today, although the personality traits are the same, is back then I had the time to actually enjoy the collection and read the stuff and read the backs and memorize all kinds of baseball statistics. I love doing all that stuff. Now, of course, as you know, I barely get a chance to
Yeah.
look at any of it. I enjoy the feeling of having it and wish I could look at that stuff more, but I don't have as much time these days. More of compilation and actually enjoying
Yeah.
all of that. So I'm going to fast forward. Dan, if you have any real pressing questions, which most of the time you don't, I'll just kind of ramrod right on through, okay? But sure,
Well,
anything comes to mind, just ask
let me
it.
jump in with one and just say, so
Okay.
when you said you were sending away for the sets, even back then you were buying a complete set as opposed to opening the booster packs that they came in. That was just
Yes,
always
correct.
the way you've done
And
it.
back then, always buying complete sets. Yes, yeah.
But
I wanted the whole thing, and so I didn't want to go through the issue of trying to get it. This way I knew I had all of the sets. Yes.
they were sets that would be typically sold in booster packs. They would be available as randomized packs in the store, but the way you did it was you just purchased the sets. They weren't just released only as complete sets.
That's correct. You're 100% correct. Yep. And it's a great question because that's always been my mentality.
Yeah.
Not so willing to gamble, more conservative. At least not on, for some reason, gambling in other areas of life, but not on really on these acquisition kinds of things. opening booster packs and you know, or wax packs as they were called back then.
Yeah, yeah.
I just went for the complete sets. Yes, I wanted to know I had every set of every card manufacturer from every year as I went along on the journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know
So
there's a
fast
lot of
forward.
I was gonna say there's a lot of discussion in a lot of groups I'm in as to whether something what makes something count as collectible. Like, is it a collectible card game? And a lot of the time, people will say there has to be the core products have to be randomized in order for it to even count as being a collectible card game. The others, if you see card games run by people like Fantasy Flight, they'll release card games where instead of releasing randomized boosters, it's like once a month you just get a small pack which contains like 20 new cards, but you just get it fixed. And those are referred to as living card games because people will say those aren't collectible if you can always just go and buy everything one at a time straight from the manufacturer with no randomness involved.
Right.
Just a little side note there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and you know, as we know in this country in particular, because I don't live in other countries, so I can't really say, but I guess in human nature, many folks are very opinionated, and many folks aren't. You know, many
Yeah.
folks are more go with the flow. I'm okay with all of it. You know, I mean, I think everyone's certainly entitled to their opinion, whether or not we agree or disagree with one another. I know it's funny because you and I, we rarely agree on anything. I mean, I'm always sending you suggestions, and you're just shooting me down one after
Yeah.
another, the firing squad. So it's okay, and I respect those opinions as well. I just, you know, I think if anybody's collecting anything, and if you're going out and acquiring it, whatever it is, however it's available, if you collect it in the sense of you
Yeah.
put it away for yourself, to me it would be collectible. But I certainly get where those folks are coming from. All right, so I'll move on to my early 20s because the who even wants to remember anything younger? I want to forget high school as fast and as often as I can. So at age 21, I enter the world of working, where you actually make money for a living.
Yeah.
I was in a computer programming class at college, and I got noticed for my proficiency at that by an instructor, and that led him to recruit me for an EDP auditing company. I was traveling around the country doing, you know, audits of military bases and how their computers are working. And that was when the War Games movie came out, 1984. And so that's what that was all about, trying to prevent folks from hacking and getting into computers. And that's what we did. So we looked at code, and we looked at you know, entryways, barriers to entry, and all the things where a system could potentially be vulnerable. And so I was in the actual working world. I parlayed that into other technologically tangential types of situations. So I was doing software engineering and hardware engineering, eventually went to computer software support, and then finally ended up at a company called Data General, and they were one of the main manufacturers of the first large-scale mainframe computers. And I was selling large-scale, you know, $1 million computer systems at that point in time. I got the rings going off. Everybody, just forget all the noise, folks. Just consider me as noisy as the rest of it.
Yeah.
In 1984, I'm age 23, and I'm attending a card show, trying to basically look for cards for my collection, when I come upon a table. And the table has boxes all over it. And I have no idea what it is. As you know, as we just said, I was just buying complete sets. So the wax boxes really were not on my radar screen in any fashion. Somebody standing next to me at the table at the card show sees all these booster boxes and says, right there standing next to me, I want everything on the table. I'm going to buy everything on the table from you,
Wow.
the person selling. And I, at that point, standing there, not knowing a darn thing, said, wait a minute. I was here first. I'm buying everything on the table. How dumb is that? No idea what was on the table.
Yeah.
But I was able to talk the seller into selling me everything on the table. And that was 1984, and that was 1984 Donruss baseball booster boxes or wax boxes that ended up being worth quite a lot of money. And that was my foray, my introduction to the sealed material markets, where you could buy these things that other people were interested in and potentially resell them at another place and time. That then led me to basically essentially start to look for the sealed material and try to buy it at a price I could eventually make a profit on. And so I did it with all those Donruss boxes, and I used to go to Costco, and they would sell Topps cards there, and I would wait there and talk to the folks, and they would deliver a pallet of cards, and I would be there with trucks, and we would load them up and get all the cards and take the palleted cards home. I would do it with I set up wholesale distribution arrangements with merchandisers, and we would buy boxes that way. And I would also buy sometimes through some of the not online, but mail order merchants that I was doing business with, to buy some of their stuff as well and bring it out to card shows and sell it to others. And I was making money. And so that was my real first foray at about 23, 24 years old into the idea that you could make money on some of the sealed stuff as well. Dan, anything at this point? I just need to shut up for a minute so everybody that's watching can just take a breath and say, man, can that guy talk?
Yeah. I mean, what we've really learned from that last little bit of story is that sometimes you will buy something that you actively don't want just to prove a point.
You know what?
Really what happened on that day.
Yes, you're right. It was a gut instinct, and I wasn't all that confident back then. Certainly not like I am now after years of wisdom and experience. But I definitely took a chance, and it definitely worked out in an advantageous manner. So,
because I think we both know if that other guy hadn't tried to buy everything, there's no way you would have bought everything. Maybe not even anything.
No, not even anything. And a lot of folks that know me will hear me consistently talk about a movie. It was a movie, it's still out there, and it was redone as a series in a different type of manner called Sliding Doors. And life for me has been a true, myriad of sliding doors where one thing happens, you don't necessarily expect it. Sometimes it just pops out, and it takes you down a completely different pathway than you ever thought you were going to go. And that's exactly what happened. You're correct. I would not possibly have even been here without that particular instance happening, where all of a sudden I was thrust into things I had no idea I was going to be thrust into. So, yeah.
In my mind, the guy at the table was now John Hannah.
Was who?
John Hannah. He's the guy in Sliding Doors.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yes, exactly.
I'm now picturing him as John Hannah.
Yeah, no, you're right. So it really... it was fun. It was fun. And it built very quickly. The timing was very good. The stuff was very hot back then. And I jumped into it. And that led me to the next thing. So in my late 1920s, one of the vendors that I had been buying a lot from in the baseball card area was called Texas Sport Card Company. And Texas Sport Cards, the gentleman who ran the company was called John DeGulio. Unfortunately, John, a business partner of mine who you'll hear about, he passed away at age 61. He was always very ill with Graves' disease, 10 years my senior. So he passed away about little over 10 years ago. But back then, we decided that we would partner up. So I said, I'm going to do something crazy. He said, why don't you come to Texas? And I told my family, my wife and everything, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to Texas. And I left the corporate job of selling $1 million computer systems to go run a partner in the running of a mail order company called Texas Sport Card Company. And what I learned back then was, and I've had that opinion for a long time since then, I fortunately have a few more dollars these days, what I haven't wasted the wealth on Pokemon cards, but over my lifetime. But I came to the conclusion that you could never be very effective at running a business in cards and this kind of collectible stuff if you continued to maintain your own collection. And why was that? Because there was too much money tied up in potential inventory purchases that you couldn't use if you never sold your collection. So that's what I did. I sold all my baseball cards all the way back to the 50s and 60s, top sets, absolutely wonderful, beautiful, crisp, mint type stuff. Do I regret it? Not at all. Do not regret it, but I knew it had to be done. I saw the money-making opportunity. I was young, and I took advantage of it. And so sold my stuff, went into partnership in Texas, and he ran a mail order business, national mail order business, advertising in magazines, and we were partners selling cards. After being there for about a year or so, an amazing opportunity came our way. He said no, but Mr. Gutsy guy over here, like a dummy, said, yes, let's do it. I wanted to do it. And what happened was in 1989, Upper Deck had just become a company. And they said, we are going to authorize 13 distributors in the United States to carry our cards. Would you guys like to be one of those distributors? And I said, we debated a lot and we had to raise financing and do all kinds of stuff. But I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's give this a shot, and was able to talk John into it. And from that time forward, it was complete and utter chaos. We had people coming from around the country, wads of cash in their hands, trying to be the first to own this stuff and trying to get it to shows. And we were the ones that had it. And I realized the opportunity to leave Texas, go back to California, and basically essentially double our distribution because they were willing to send to both of us. So I was back in my house in California. They were sending pallets of cards to my house. They were inside the garage, on the driveway, inside the house, people lining up. It was complete madness.
Wow.
And these were the hot cards at the time. It was Ken Griffey rookie time, and everything was crazy. And we still know, of course, Upper Deck is out there to this day.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I was in the card business. It was very successful. There was a lot of demand. Having that distribution outlet was huge. And I decided to open up a retail store in Pleasanton, where we were in California, Northern California, to continue to facilitate not only the mail order part of the business, but retail as well.
So if I can just jump in with a quick question. So before you opened the store, when you were doing it with the company in Texas and then again in California, at that point, were you selling as, as distributors? Were you selling in bulk to other stores, or were you selling more direct to the end consumer, like selling packs and boxes to the people who were going to open them, or was it just selling large quantities at, bulk prices?
There was no restrictions on what we were able to do. There was not
So you
like,
were doing
it
both?
was, you could do both, correct?
Okay.
Yeah. So they didn't say you had to set a certain price. It was, that they weren't upset if we were selling high because the demand was high. It was, ironically, it was one of the only years, that very first year, that I really made any money, but I made
Okay.
a lot of money in that year. And that carried me over for a couple years where there was subsequently virtually no business because the country was going into recession.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a good question. There was no restrictions. We could pretty much do whatever we want.
If someone
They
wants one
didn't just
box
send,
or someone wants 1,000 boxes, they can come to you.
correct. And they didn't just sell boxes. We got boxes, we got complete sealed sets. We got cases of every single card in the set in 800 count so if there was 500, 600 cards, we had 800 of each of those cards just stacked up, pre-cut in cases for folks that wanted to buy singles as well.
Wow.
So it was cards on top of cards on top of cards. So once I opened this store and we are still selling, everything starts to take a turn. So when I say that, when I say everything starts to take a turn, number one, counterfeiters. Number two, resealing boxes. So not necessarily counterfeiters, but rechanging the contents. By the way, for those who are listening in the Pokemon hobby, of course, does that sound familiar? Where the money goes, the criminals will follow. And so those were the first two issues that I faced that were very disheartening. Number three, we had the steroids issues with Barry Bonds and Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco. And so now we had people just turning off to baseball players in general. And then finally, we get to 1991 or two, and it's recession, and nobody wants to buy anything. There was a saturation of cards in the market. You didn't just have Upper Deck, you had Score, you had Sportflix, all these other manufacturers were coming out on top of Topps, Donruss, and Fleer, and there was just too much on store shelves. People didn't have an interest. So at that point, I said, look, this isn't working anymore. I need to get out of it. I'm going to mention two other things that were very disheartening, as I mentioned earlier as well. Number one, I was actually robbed at gunpoint in the retail store. So I realized at that point, forget the scariness of going through that, but I knew that folks had been watching me at night in the store for a long time for that to happen. So that took a long time for me to get over that thought of somebody always watching you and planning to rob you. And the second thing was, and this one's just incredible, when we went to sell all the inventory in the warehouse, We get to the upper deck cases, and I start to lift them up and move them away from the wall. There were holes in the cases. The cases were empty. So what happened was our neighbor in the warehouse next door had spent enough time with us looking at where the cases were in alignment with the beams and the ceiling and stuff in the warehouse.
Wow.
And they actually knew just where the upper deck cases were. And when we were not around, had cut their way like mice through the kind of labyrinth, through the pathways of all of these cases to remove all of the inside boxes they could get to, such that ultimately the top cases did not fall from not being supported well from the lower ones anymore. And all you could do was shake your head and say, if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I would never have believed it.
And so when you say it was the neighbors, did they actually cut through the wall of the warehouse?
They cut through the drywall of the warehouse and went straight into the upper deck cases that were against the wall. So, am I the dummy? You know me, Dan. I take responsibility and accountability for all the mistakes. So I never even thought about this till I just said it to you right now. I guess looking back, I guess I was dumb to think that I should ever have a case, a butt against a wall. But who would have ever thought, right? You're keeping space and you're trying to keep movement. So,
I mean, I've heard of it with I'm sure you know, over the last couple of years, robberies of trading card stores that sell singles have gone way, way up with all the, the media attention on the big sales with Pokemon and Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh, the price of these singles. And it wasn't until the first time I saw a news story of like guys didn't break into the card store, they broke into the empty store next to it and cut through the wall. That's the first time you think that it even crossed my mind that would be something that could happen. Obviously, in those cases, it wasn't just cut through the wall and cut through the boxes. It was cut through the wall, run in, grab the stuff out the case, and back out. But I mean, especially if you knew it was the neighbor who worked next to you or had the warehouse next to you. If it was someone you thought you could trust, then
we trusted them. We talked to them as if they were friends. Had no idea. And it's interesting. I've had so many people contact me and say, David, we want to open a retail store, blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, boy, be careful for all the reasons you just said, Dan, because sometimes it just isn't worth the hassle of having to worry about it. And I didn't realize that people were coming in through adjacent stores, but that makes sense. You can certainly arm up your own store, but it's not going to help you in a drywall situation when it comes to just cutting through a wall. So,
yeah, because obviously the big part of breaking into a store is if you're breaking through the main door, they have so little time, the security system goes off when they first cut the first bit of the gate or whatever, and so they've got maybe seconds in the store if they're doing that, or the cops are already there. But if you come in through the drywall, then you've got your entire time from the alarm going off to the cops arriving to be in and out. There's no gate, there's no anything. And we are seeing, I mean, I guess especially around where I live, there's a lot of vacant stores in malls and strips of stores. There's a lot of stores going out of business. There's a lot of empty stores. And people are really taking advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I basically exited trading cards for a while, and then we fast forward to 1999. At this point, I have 3 young children, and I read articles about this new hobby that's coming out. And I say to the kids, let's jump in the car and go to KB Toy Store. Let's line up for this release. And we started buying Pokemon cards. And my kids, never having really taken much of an interest, we played some games with them, we did stuff, but they didn't really take much of an interest. My life goes on busy as well. And so that was it. Other than just the initial acquisition of a few decks, a few packs, maybe a collection box or whatever, 2 that were out there. That's all we did with Pokemon, and put it aside, never thought about it, didn't acquire very much. And now I'm laying in bed in 2004. All right. And this is where my story picks up that most folks have, if they've read about any of this stuff or listened to some of my podcasts, have heard about. The rest of it, no one I've really sort of talked about before. But in 2004, I'm laying in bed at night, however you could. I guess I have to say that I got out of bed, because when I say the story, it's wrong. I didn't know if we had internet or phones or whatever, but I went to my computer and I just started browsing eBay. Why? I don't know. As all of you know, I never know why I do what I do. It's not worth even trying to analyze. Otherwise, my therapist wouldn't get paid. That's why she's in business. So 2004, I end up buying 2 sets that night. I know one of them was EX Dragon, and the other was whatever set is right next to it. Maybe Ruby and Sapphire, Dan. I don't know. That's what came to
Uh,
mind.
Sandstorm would be the one right before Dragon, and then Ruby Sapphire was right before Sandstorm.
Then what's after EX Dragon?
After EX Dragon, I think, is Team Magma versus Team Aqua.
That's what I would have bought then. So I probably bought Team Aqua, Team Magma, and I bought the EX Dragon. I
So
spent
they would have
$700.
been the newest two sets at the time if you were 2004.
Yes. So that's what I bought, the newest sets. I did not know what those sets were. I did not know what those cards were. I do not have any clue. What does it say? I sound like a Dr. Seuss book. But anyways, I had no idea what I bought. I only knew when I woke up the next morning, I felt a huge amount of guilt. I spent $700 and I went to my wife and I said, I need to tell you what I did last night. I'm a complete fool. I have no idea why. I don't even know what I bought. Forgive me. And she said, I will forgive you in time. And then she gave me a list of things to do, punishment, so to speak. It took a lot longer than I would have expected. And still to this day, I'm still paying in certain ways. But I did buy those cards and she did forgive me. And guess what I said to my mind? Mr. Completionist said, hey, dummy, if you just bought those sets and you don't know what you bought, you may as well figure out what you bought. You may as well figure out what's out there prior to those sets and see if you can start filling in whatever this Pokemon thing is. A quick offshoot to this discussion. The lady who I bought those sets from is still making the sets for me today. So you're talking 19 years later, she's still making my sets. She's in the process of putting my Crown Zenith set together for me right now. It's absolutely unthinkable how many folks have come and gone, and she's still out there doing that for me and helping me in other ways as well. So that's just phenomenal. And just a quick thank you to her. I don't ever think she likes me to say her name, so I won't.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yes, exactly. So the next day I got to it. And I'm on eBay and I'm looking for complete sets and I'm trying to go back and gauge the history of what the hobby had done. And I start to try to ask questions and find out about what is it that's out there. And little did I know that I happened to be entering at a time when the hobby was fairly slow. I guess, you know more about this. Why don't you talk for just a minute so I can be quiet about what was going on at that time in place in the 2004, 2005 timeframe?
Well, at that time we're very early into Nintendo's reacquisition of the Pokemon license from Wizards of the Coast. I know we talked a bit in the last episode about how Wizards of the Coast was basically actively trying to kill the competitive Pokemon scene for the 15 and older players to try and get them to play Magic instead. They completely removed the age 15 and above age division from tournaments, so you couldn't play in a Pokemon tournament if you were age 15 or over. And that obviously led to a lot of people leaving the game because there were people who, even if they'd been in the game when they were younger than 15, once you get to the point of, you can now no longer play with your friends, you're probably going to stop buying the cards. And anyone who goes to tournaments today will know that now the Masters division, which is basically age 15 and up, is by far the biggest division that plays. And I think even back then, you would still have it before they got rid of it, that it was a very, very large portion of the tournament because, a lot of these people, they don't need to rely on their parents to be taking them to tournaments. The younger divisions, you've got to get the parents involved, get the parents to realize why Pokemon is worthwhile doing. Once you get about age 15, 16, you can sort of do it off your own back. Sometimes you may have to convince your parents to let you take a trip, but they don't have to take it with you. So it's a lot easier for these older players to play card games. But Wizards completely removed it. They wanted them playing Magic instead. Wizards, they completely own Magic. They were licensing Pokemon. They make a lot more money from Magic, and that is why their license didn't get renewed. I don't think it was a case of they cancelled the contract. I think it was just their time came to renew, and Pokemon said no. They said, we're going to do it instead. So Pokemon had the pretty mammoth task of trying to rebuild the player base and just rebuild confidence in the brand in Pokemon itself. And obviously, as we've seen over time, they've done that. But 2004, 2005, we're just a year or two in. They're slowly increasing the player base again, but it's nowhere near what it was when people were, when base set came out and everyone was on the Pokemon hype. I guess in addition to the card game, Pokemon overall is kind of low interest for a lot of people in that time frame because the kids who got super, super into it in 99, 2000 have maybe got a little bit older and they've worn off a bit, and not as many people are coming into it with Generation 3. That's just always what it felt like from my perspective as a kid at the time. I know I dropped out of Pokemon sometime around Gen 2. My younger brother, who's 3 years younger than me, he's played a bit of Gen 2, dropped out a bit before Gen 3. And it started to come back. As I say, Nintendo were making progress on it, but it was a very, very low point for Pokemon as a whole, and especially for the card game.
All right, so I'm going to continue, but before we do that, younger brother, why do I not know that? You have a younger brother?
I have 2 younger brothers.
Okay, so I can't believe that. I hate when you hide stuff from me. Dan, what do they do? What do they look like? Do they look like you? What do they do? What's going on with the 2 younger brothers? I just need to know.
Well, neither of them really look that much like me. But I've got
Okay.
a brother who's 3 years younger than me. He's the one I said was into Pokemon and collecting a bit. We like collected together as kids because that's how it was with parents. But I think the first time we wanted to buy cards, my mum sat us down and said, "Okay, we are making the decision now. Are you collecting together, or are you going to have your own separate collections? And once you make that decision, we are not changing it." And we both decided to collect together so that we could fill in more gaps in the binder, build up the sets. Because she had said, we're not having a situation where you have a binder and then we have to split it, and then we're not having a situation where we're trying to put 2 collections together. She just absolutely forbade that.
And obviously that didn't work out very well for you and your brother, so I'm sorry to hear that, since you and Laura do it 100% completely different now and break everything in the independent collections. Yes. Yes.
That is because with me and Laura, that is because coming together, we already had our own independent.
No, that's an excuse. No, it's community property, state, joint property, tenancy in common. Come on, Dan. Too many excuses.
Look,
okay.
If I pull out one of Laura's binders, Laura puts her binder. Card number 1, reverse copy of card number 1. Card number 2, reverse copy of card number 2. I go 1, 2, 3, all the way to the end, then all the reverses. That alone would never let us combine these collections because we cannot agree on that. But yeah, so I've both my brothers obviously still live in England, and then I have another brother who is 8 years younger than me, and I'm actually going back to England for his wedding in October.
Oh, wow.
So
wow. What do they do? What do your brothers do for a living?
So the older one, who's only 3 years younger than me, he does some like IT related stuff. I don't even really know. I know he's in between jobs at the moment, but all I know about it is that if I message him how to do something in Excel, he can tell me. So a lot of my collecting spreadsheets, I sent him loads of questions on, and genuinely gun to my head, I could not tell you what my other brother does for a living.
All right. I like the fan.
All I know is he has a new baby and a dog, and he's getting married at the end of the year. But I genuinely have no clue what he does for a living.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Maybe it was too personal for me to ask, Dan. Number one is we all know how secretive you Brits can be. So
also,
I don't.
By the time I think he must have still been in school when I left the country. So okay. I'm blaming it on that.
All right. Well, when you're very, very wealthy with all the Pokemon cards, hopefully he won't just come to mooch off you. So it's all going to be good. So Dan, a good discussion of how things had kind of fizzled a little bit back in that time frame, and I'm going to move forward a little more quickly now, just because at 40 minutes plus in our video, boy, can I talk, and I apologize to all of you for that. As I apologize to all of you, well, that's fine. I appreciate it. About you. So I want to say thank you. I'm going to use that as a segue to say thank you to those who actually do care and want to listen. I really appreciate that. Dan does as well. The last video we just did, which again, I guess it's published, yeah. It was incredible to see all the comments, all the people that are starting to engage, more and more viewers and viewers watching through to the end. So I just want to take a quick, and say thank you. It means a lot. Okay, I'm going to continue up. I bought the sets. I'm on eBay looking. I start looking for complete sets, but I didn't ask the folks that had the complete sets for the single set they were selling. I said, what if I were to buy every set that you're selling out there all at once? Can you give me a deal? And I ended up buying 2 collections back then. One was nothing and one was something. When I say nothing, to me at the time, I was ecstatic, so excited. The nothing collection was like all of the first 18 sets. first editions and basic, and unlimited editions and whatever would be the first 18 sets is what I remember in my mind.
Yeah.
Southern Islands, all kinds of stuff like that. Put away in nice binders and everything. And there was a gentleman in Michigan. He agreed to sell me the stuff. So that was number one. I got caught up to the beginning of where I thought I'd need to be from going backwards from Magma, Aqua, and Dragon. And the second collection turned out to be something.
Yeah.
And that collection, I think it's interesting. I've never said this before. It's really amazing. I bought for $7,000, if I recall. It might be 13, but I'm going to say 7,000 is what comes to mind. And what happened was the gentleman who had that collection was not interested in Pokemon anymore. He wanted to take a vintage car and he wanted the money to rebuild that car for himself. His son was a part of the game and they built the collection and stuff together, but was no longer interested. Neither of them were interested anymore. And that collection ended up being just an absolute beautiful acquisition. And not because it had all those 18 card sets and everything else, but because this person was an ultimate completionist. And so it had one pack of every booster pack every issued. It had, one blister pack of everything issued. It had the A deck, the B deck, the sample cards, pretty much anything that would have been rare, including, in fact, the Tropical Mega Battle set. So when I got this in and I started looking and started understanding and continued to shop on eBay to now understand what are variants and what's all this other stuff, I began to say, you've really got something special here. You don't understand how special it is, but you need to keep it going. And so that original childhood collector mentality took off again. And I said, I have to keep this going. It's like an obligation because these cards are not out there. And if they are, they're very, very expensive. So I started shopping for and learning about all of the other types of variants, which were finalist cards and world cards and promo cards and all of the things that were, that we think of today as what would complete out a master type of set. And I made a ton of mistakes, financial mistakes. I bought things for so much money, as we've said before in previous videos. I bought a finalist card from one of the championship winners on eBay for about $6,000 back then. Yeah, finalist stamped card.
Yeah, finalist stamped rather than the actual trophy. Yeah.
That's right. Did not know there was a trophy card. Had no idea. Thought I bought the best card. And then I'm like, what? There's something else?
Yeah.
And so, but it kept fueling me to keep moving forward. And that's what I did. And I learned and I learned and I learned. And I acquired and acquired and acquired. In 2006, for some reason, Mr. Introverted, I don't leave my home virtually for anything these days, just because I'm always working here doing stuff and I have no interest to go party unless my wife, feels like it's a party evening. She doesn't party. We don't party. I always joke about partying. I'm always making it up. So, so basically, I thought, let's start going to Worlds to get these cards. And we did. And from 2006 all the way to 2019, I met Dan in, when was it, Dan? 2010 or so?
Yeah, 2010 was the first time I went.
We were at Worlds, going in front of people, trying to make contact with winners and buying their cards. Along the way, I met so many people, so many friendships, so many kind people that had no interest, no reason to help my wife and I acquire these cards, yourself, Dan, included. Yeah. But you've certainly been the one that's been the most helpful. But I'm talking about people that were translating from, Japanese or, to whatever, to English to help us acquire, from translators in the tournaments that would help because they knew that I was paying a very fair and reasonable price and trying to get a good deal for both me and the person I was purchasing from. Winners who went out of their way to sell to us, and a lot of folks along the way said no, and that was fine, but we just kept plugging ahead and we find ourselves, where we are today. And as time has gone on and I've had to work a little bit in spurts, the pandemic is what fueled me to really get back in. I had a little more time at home, and I started to go back and say, everybody thinks about me as the #1 English card comprehensive collection collector. Are you a fraud? Are you kidding yourself? What if it's not true? So I went out and I made a concerted effort to fill every single hole in every single set. And I did that with all the Black Star promos and the variants and the jumbos and got myself caught up. And that's when I started doing my own videos and saying, now you can actually put yourself out there and you are. You're not kidding anyone. And so I was joking the other day in one of our podcasts with you, Dan, about the couple of brothers that were in some foreign country that said they had the most English language different cards.
They said
and
they had the most complete set.
Yeah, and you talked about, well, you just pay Guinness Book of World Records and they'll figure it out if you're the better one.
Yeah.
So we'll do that at some point.
Yeah.
But that's how the card collection came to be. That's how it's continued to manifest. And it has been, again, I can't thank all of the people that may be watching or have heard about me or have helped me along the way. I'm so blessed to have been able to make such wonderful, supportive contacts. It was interesting years ago when I did my collection. For those who don't know, it's not just the cards. I also have one booster box from every set that has different cards inside it. So it's just a different colored box, but the cards are the same. That was never of interest to me. But if it was, first or based or unlimiteds or whatever, or it was, fourth prints, or it was something else, I would have those boxes, or red, logo, the box from the, you know what I'm talking about, Dan, something like that.
Jungle and Fossil have the red
Pokemon. I know Jungle has the red, but it's nothing different inside. Fossil red boxes are different. Then I bought a theme deck from everything as well. I used to have curio cases where before everything got so out of control, I would proudly display a booster box with the 2 or 3 theme decks on top of it. It was so colorful, so beautiful, love looking at it. Now you feel like you're going to put them out and it's too dangerous and somebody's going to come and rob me at gunpoint. So now I've got 24/7 security and all the rest of it, and I still put everything away. Yeah. But I still have that wonderful feeling every time I open the binders and say, do I own that card? Like I was looking yesterday and I'm on eBay and I see I want to see if I can remember the set. It was Origins. So it was Ancient Origins.
Okay.
And it was card 69 of 98. And I saw it on eBay and it had to do with like an international challenge or something. It had like a green stamp on it. And I thought, David, do you even have green stamp cards? And there was a regular edition and there was a staff edition.
Ace Trainer, I think that one is.
It was Ace Trainer. It was an Ace Trainer.
It was for 2 tournaments, one in the US and one in Europe, I think, and then the one in Europe had a different logo on it. So there's 4 different versions because there's the 2 players and the 2 staffs.
Yes. And of course, do I have an idea what I have, Dan? You know I don't. So I saw the card, I start panicking. I'm like, oh my goodness. I thought everything was complete. There's no way I have this card. And I pull out about 25 or 30 sets. Of course, it's the last set on the bottom of the stack. And I pull it out and guess what? It's in there. So this is what it's fun to do, is fun to look back, fun to look at the sets as they're complete. I like them in binders. It makes for an easier way for me to view them. And I'm at 50 some minutes in this cast. So I'm going to say one last thing and then throw it back to you, Dan. There was one more real neat acquisition as along the way between what I've done personally with the sets being made for me. Other people have stepped up with sets when my gal was not making sets, and all of our running around. But what was it, Dan, about 2010 with the pre-release Raichu?
It was a little earlier than that. So it was 2008 that Will bought the pre-release Raichu. It was because it was April Fool's Day 2008 that his sale went through, because I remember it was a big deal on PokeGym, and Pokepop wrote an article that it was happening, but because the sale went through on April Fool's Day, he let it run for the whole day of, is this real or not? And then when it went over to April 2nd, revealed, yes, this is real. Hey, it's future Dan here, the Dan that is going through and editing this. We actually both got the date wrong of that pre-release Raichu sale. David said 2010, I said 2008. It was actually 2009, April Fool's Day 2009, that Will made that purchase of the pre-release Raichu, and Dave bought it later in the year. My apologies, but at least we caught it. And I think it was either later in 2008 or into 2009 that you actually bought the pre-release Raichu from him.
So I was thinking about that this morning when I was reviewing just what I was going to talk about today. Isn't it most interesting? It's sort of this full circle moment. Isn't it crazy that I acquired that card because the person who had it before me, Will, tried to get it graded and they wouldn't grade it, and he didn't want it not graded. So my propensity not to grade and not to
Yeah.
worry about grading so far, which hasn't hurt me so far. I guess one could argue that I'll never get anything for the card if I want to sell it because it's not graded. But that's how I got that card. And I was at a
Yeah.
basketball game waiting for my son to go play. We had gone to a restaurant right before, and I get this call from you, maybe, or someone else. It was right, I don't know, but it was one of the folks that was involved,
Yeah.
and said, "Why, this card is available. We could get you this card. Are you interested?" And I said, "Of course." And the story behind it. And I think you would correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. I think that he paid maybe 10,000, and I paid 10,500 for him just to flip it to me.
No, he paid
Um,
10,500.
yeah, that's what I recall. And to this day,
Yeah.
I
I think
am
you
the
you
owner.
paid him. I think you paid him exactly what he paid for it. I
Oh,
don't think
okay, okay,
I don't think he
got it,
made any profit on it.
got it. So to this day, that being the only one of those cards to ever come out, and we've said this
Yeah.
before, but I'm gonna throw it in right now because I'm gonna throw a bunch of shade. What I'm gonna say is, how many people have tried to acquire that card and have basically said, it's not a real card, it's not a real card, whatever. And then eventually, when they tried to acquire it, oh, it's a real card, all right. And then when they weren't able to acquire it, but of course, it's not a real card.
Yeah.
So that is the other thing that, along with some of these other real neat things, another one I'm going to show in a couple weeks that I got recently as well, are one of a kinds, two of a kinds, very few of a kinds that have led me to continue to maintain my internal feeling of obligation, as we talked about last video, to continue to build this collection as kind of a memorial, as a what do I try to say, as a museum almost for the
Yeah.
hobby.
I mean,
And that's it.
interesting thing is, the Raichu wasn't even the last hole in your collection that you filled, because you already had the Raichu when I first met you. But the first Worlds I met you at, you were still missing 3 trophy cards.
Yep.
Even having already had the Raichu, you were missing the number 1 and the number 3 from 2004, and you were missing the number 2 from 2007. And as it turned out, you were missing the Error Mantine from the English versus set, but we didn't know that yet. Um, that one was actually an interesting one with the Mantine. I'll give you a bit of a history on that one. Everyone knew about the Error Mantine because it was well talked about that at the 2001 event, they had to replay the first couple of rounds because this English card had an error on it. And basically all of the photos anyone saw of English versus cards were on PokeGym. It was a guy called Steve P. I think either him or his son played in that Chocolate Mega Battle, and they uploaded the photos. Obviously, the Mantine has the error. Everyone sees that it's there, but no one is like seeing any photos of any other sets. And I'm talking to you about it one year, and you were like, "Oh, I didn't know about the error." And I have you send. I think I'm talking to you before Worlds, so I say for Worlds, just get some photos of your set, and you bring it in and you show it to me, and I say, David, that Mantine isn't an error. I say, you didn't know about this error because you don't have the error. I don't know if anyone knows that a corrected version exists. And that is when we then have to look into the rabbit hole of like, why is there a corrected version? Were some of the English ones at this tournament errors and some weren't? And then that's when we looked into it. It's like, oh, they were a second tournament a year later. And you did then have to go and pick up an error Mantine as well. And of course, we obviously did then pick up those last 3 trophies over the next couple of years. I think all 3 of those that you were missing for a long time came in pretty rapid succession, one after the other. I think it was maybe a 12-month period where you actually got those last 3 trophies.
And they all came from out of the country, and they all came from, 2 of them. One I had to middle across from Japan, but the other 2 I actually got directly from the winners, which was fantastic. They finally willing to agree to sell. And the error, or I'm sorry, I won't say error corrected because I know what you're saying, but I don't even know what you said. So the Mantine I was able to buy from the gentleman we know, Mosin, who actually broke up a set years ago, and put them out as singles. And that was a little bit of a tough conversation. It took a while to get him to agree to do that, but I was so thankful to him for allowing me just to buy that single card that I needed to add to the other 30 to make a complete set of 31. So all of these stories are kind of behind, like you say, the collection and how it's kind of grown to be where it is today. But they're what make the journey so enjoyable looking back. And luckily you can remember and tell me a lot of it. So, so
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate everyone listening today because it's kind of fun to retell it.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the stories about actually getting the Pokemon stuff, I'm sure, will get told on this podcast a lot, I'm sure. But it was nice to get some history of what came before the Pokemon
Yeah,
in this one.
yeah,
I guess
yeah,
one
and
question that I thought of while you were talking, I guess I didn't jump in with it. I know you only collected baseball cards as far as the sports went. Did your store and that distribution company only deal in baseball as well, or did you deal in all sports when you had that company?
well, my store dealt with all sports,
Okay.
for sure. So we were selling everything, not only sports, not only. I mean, we did back then the pretty girls bench warmer cards. I think they still make them today. Pretty amazing. We would do shows, and the girls would come and sign. And my most, what would I say? My most esoteric or different kind of set would be Desert Storm. So I used to have the phone in my bed at night, and 24 hours, if that phone rang, somebody was calling to order something from the magazine, and I
Yeah.
would need to put the order down and get it done the next day. I had people calling from across the world during Desert Storm, the soldiers, because they wanted to pick up the General Norman Schwarzkopf card or whatever was going on, and the actual set. All that stuff's worthless now, but how funny, when it was just complete madness and everybody was trying to buy everything. So yeah, we sold everything. I remember doing Fleer basketball packs and with people looking for Jordan rookies and just
Yeah.
coming in. It was $2,000 or $3,000 a pack to buy a few cards, and that was the gamble for people coming in with cash to just see
Yeah.
if they could find the grails. So yeah, I was doing a little bit of everything. People might wonder, I forgot to mention this. How did I advertise? So back then, today it's internet. Back then it was in your hobby magazines. And what I realized was the aura of looking bigger was very important for marketing. So although I wasn't really maybe necessarily the biggest out there, I had 5, 6, 7, 8 pages running in magazines. And so there was enough variety and enough idea of me being large enough with my inventory that people were interested in purchasing from us. And so we had that consistent kind of customer base going on. So yeah.
Two interesting things about the Desert Storm set that you mentioned. First off, at a regionals last year, some Pokemon collectors cracked a box of Desert Storm.
Oh my goodness.
I'd never
Hilarious.
heard of it. I'd
Yes.
never heard of it until I think they were all sharing a hotel room. I think it was a New Jersey regionals, and one of the days we were going into New York because it was a. So it was funny. It was a regionals where it was right after they started doing tournaments again. They were just starting to open up after the pandemic, and they didn't allow any spectators in. In order to get into the tournament, into the hall, you had to be a player or you had to be a staff member. They didn't do any sort of spectator badges. So a lot of collectors showed up in. They'd already booked their hotels and stuff. Showed up, found out they couldn't actually get into the venue. So I was able to get in for a couple of days because I ended up being on staff. But then we all went to New York for a day afterwards, and when we were stopped by the hotel room, I saw that they had this box of Desert Storm, and I picked it up and I started looking through it, and I was looking very closely at the photos on the cards because other funny thing, my father-in-law was in Desert Storm,
Oh
so
wow.
I
Wow.
was checking to see if he somehow showed up on a group shot or a background shot, and I don't think
That
he did. The cards I
that's
saw,
funny.
but it was a very very weird experience to be going through trading cards looking to see if my father-in-law's photo was on there.
Dan, how much of a nerd do you have to be, 25 years later to be opening Desert Storm cards and looking through them? I mean, and that's part one. And part two is you must have immediately made them part of your completely different collection with My Little Pony and
Well,
whatever else you've got going on there.
I didn't. I wasn't there for the opening. I just saw them lying around, and I had like I don't actually own Desert Storm cards. I'm My collection seems like it could be everything, but there is one very solid rule. I collect card games. I
Yes, I
don't
understand.
collect cards. If
Okay.
it anything that's just a collectible card, like we talked about the tops cards, I'm never going to collect the tops cards.
Yeah.
I'm never going to collect anything that's just, photos on a card. Even though I'm never going to play 99% of these games, I collect cards that are part of a game. It's the one rule I've put in. It's the one thing that interests me. And that's the only hard and fast thing about my collection is it has to be a trading card game.
Right back to our goals video of last time. So good. You know what? Anything where you can slice off a little bit of something and make it more manageable, I'm all for it.
Yeah. But I do have hundreds of different games. Literally, because I did that one video where I opened 100 different games.
You know, we said you're very authentic, and no one knows why you have that many games, Dan, but congratulations on you feeling good about that many games.
I mean, that one was literally just, this will be a fun video if I open a pack from 100 different games. But I did, there's probably about, at any one time, there's probably at least 10 to 15 different games I'm actively picking stuff up for.
Good.
But then, like, I finish some, or I'll lose interest in some and move on to another one for a while and go back to it later. Pokemon is really the only consistent one. Others I'll jump in and out of.
And of course, Dan, my number is 1. 1 and only 1.
So maybe we need to do my origin story and my collecting story at some point in the future, and we'll go down that rabbit hole.
I wouldn't mind doing that, Dan. I just want to make sure everybody does it right before bed, so at least they're snuggled comfortably under their sheets, so that if they get super bored, they can just drift off to sleep real quickly.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, it's Future Dan again. I totally forgot to mention that this weekend I will have a booth at the Columbus Trading Card and Collectible Show. The address for that is, it's the Franklin County Fairgrounds in Hilliard, so if anyone is in or around the Hilliard, Columbus area, and you want to pop in, see me, see all of the other booths and vendors and stuff that are going on, definitely pop down. That is this Saturday the 3rd, running from about 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Swap down, buy some stuff from me and some of the other people. It's going to be a fun day, and I hope to see some of you then. Alright, well, I think that is it for this week from us. Hopefully you did enjoy. Let's say a bit of a different one. Next week we will be back with reading through all of your comments from this episode and last episode, talking about any new Pokemon news or any new card game news that has come up. So hopefully you do join us then. Hopefully you did still enjoy this one. And we will see you later.
Can I say one last thing, Dan, before we go?
Go ahead.
Okay. Hey, guys, send us some comments on what you guys have done. How did you begin your collecting journey? I love reading about that stuff. We got a couple of those actually in this last one. So I read some fantastic stuff, which we'll comment on last time. But let us know, what was your unique entry into collecting, and why do you focus on what you focus on? I am a part of this hobby as much as you guys. I read every single comment. I know Dan does as well. And we love to hear the stories and share them with other collectors. Sometimes something you're doing gives someone else a great idea too, to maybe change or manage or, shift up their goals. So please share, please like, please continue to listen. Thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. Take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys. I would like to say a huge thank you to everyone who chooses to support me on Patreon. If you'd like to get involved, help support the channel, and see some behind-the-scenes content, click on the link in the description. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching. Check out some more videos right here.
And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome Pokemon content from DJ Gigabyte.
Gotta catch 'em all!